Hey YouTube, this will be week 16 for the YouTube Pagan Challenge, and this week's topic is what spiritual practices do you use most often? And this will also be take 3 of this video, because the first time I did it, I kind of started to go off on a tangent and I didn't like the way it was going on that. The second time, I kind of answered a question with a question without actually going into any details of things. And I'm still going to do that, but I wanted to cover a couple more things in this particular take. So, the first thing, like I said, a question with another question is, since it is what spiritual practices do you use most often, I think the issue that comes about is what defines a spiritual practice. Because it can vary so much from person to person. There are some ones that are kind of generally accepted, but that doesn't mean they're universally accepted. Meditation is a generally accepted one. But in kind of the day and age that we live in, where people, you have medical professionals recommending meditation just to help people unwind and relax. So if you're using it in that manner, is it still a spiritual practice? There are people who feel most connected when they're out on a walk or working in a garden or things along that nature. Whereas people who are using it for just health benefit reasons, the same can be used for like yoga in that instance, because it has a spiritual element in it traditionally. But a lot of people are using it just as a way to get in shape. And, I personally feel that if you're doing it correctly, you will have a spiritual element in it anyway, whether you're going for that or not. But that's a personal opinion. So that's the question. To answer the question is, what defines a spiritual practice? Prayer beads, a specific chant or prayer that you say at a certain time per day, flame keeping in this particular instance. Like myself, have just started on eCauldron. There's the cauldron, I believe it's supposed to be kill, because the C sound is a K sound, but it's CILL, which is the older word for a church. But they do flame keeping for Bridget. So there's 19 days, and everybody has a shift, and it's just tending that flame from sunset to sunset. It's local time, so it's a little bit looser. It's not incredibly formal, and it doesn't have to be an actual flame. Some people will use a piece of jewelry or whatever, LED candle. It's kind of looser, but it's a spiritual practice, because it is drawing a connection to Bridget, bride, pronounce it however you wish, for that particular thing. And I did it years ago, and then I had quit going to the eCauldron, and so I stopped. I didn't even check in on one of their threads, which I feel guilty about that, but that is the one side of a spiritual practice that I am currently partaking in. Another thing that I do is I have the verse Charge of the Goddess by my bed, and this started when I was trying to memorize it for a ritual I was doing, but I try to kind of recite it each night. The poetic version, it's something pretty. It was a tip for helping fall asleep, is to come up with a prayer or something to say each night, and since it lined up with what I was already trying to do, that was what was chosen. I have other practices that I would find as a spiritual element that others may not. I have I keep a sourdough starter. I make bread. That's something that I find a spiritual connection to. You're working with all the elements. It's something that has been this, for lack of any sort of better word, not that there is a better word for it, but it's been this magical process, because I had this little jar that the only thing that ever went into it is flour and water. And it's a really surprising thing what'll happen if you put some flour and water in a jar and just keep continuing to take a little bit out each day and put some new stuff back in, because I'll have to make a video on that sometime. I actually plan to do a couple of kitchen-y videos, but I have to get over the fact that I don't like my kitchen. I like doing stuff in my kitchen. I don't like my kitchen as it currently stands. It needs a lot of work. So, you know, spiritual practice really is one of those things that varies so much from person to person. I would love to get into some prayer beads and stuff. I've made a couple, but they don't, I'm not great about actually utilizing them in my practice. It's because it wasn't something I was raised in. I went to a Lutheran church. I can't even really say I was raised whatever religion, because I was going to a private school that was just kind of something I had asked for. I didn't quite understand what the meaning of it was at the time. But so that was an influence. I mean, as I've stated before, I was going to this Lutheran school at the same time tending a UU church with my great grandparents. So the influences were very different. But that's not something that you would ever find. You don't see people like praying the rosary or having that tangible element. I think it can definitely help. Like right now, I'm fiddling with an old tag. You have something to kind of fiddle with and not. It can help focus